They went to bed believing the farm was their safe haven. By morning, the house was a tomb. The Holloway family's sprawling property on the edge of Willow Creek was meant to be a sanctuary from the chaos of the outside world. Instead, it became the stage for one of the most brutal massacres in the county's history. What makes this case so haunting isn't only the violence, but the unanswered question that still lingers: why would anyone want the Holloways dead? The Holloway farm sat at the far end of a winding dirt road, surrounded by fields of corn and soybeans that stretched for miles. To the locals, it was the picture of stability, a place where you could smell fresh hay in the summer and hear the creak of the old windmill in the winter. Generations of Holloways had lived and died on that land. But the family at the center of this story, David, Margaret, and their 3 children, were supposed to carry that legacy forward. Instead, their names would be etched in tragedy. David Holloway was the head of the family, a 3rd-generation farmer with a reputation for being both stubborn and kind. He was the kind of man who woke before sunrise, drank his coffee black, and had dirt under his fingernails by 6 in the morning. Neighbors described him as reliable, the one who would stop his tractor to help if your car broke down on the side of the road. But beneath that exterior was a man under pressure. Farming had grown harder over the years, with fluctuating crop prices, unpredictable weather, and mounting debt. Friends later recalled that David had become quieter in recent months, carrying the weight of financial strain on his shoulders. His wife, Margaret, was the opposite in temperament: warm, social, and always quick to offer pie and coffee to visitors. She worked part-time at the local library, where she was beloved for reading children's books in animated voices. Margaret had grown up in Willow Creek, and she often told her friends she couldn't imagine living anywhere else. To those who knew her, she was the heart of the family, the glue that held everyone together when stress or hard times threatened to pull them apart. Together, David and Margaret raised 3 children. Emily, age 16, a bright, artistic teenager who filled sketchbooks with drawings of the farm animals she grew up with. Ryan, age 13, who was obsessed with baseball and dreamed of pitching for the local high school team, and little Sarah, only 8, who loved nothing more than helping her mom in the kitchen and trailing after her siblings. By all appearances, the Holloways were living the small-town American dream. But that dream would shatter overnight. In the months leading up to the crime, there were whispers of trouble. David had been seen arguing with his brother, Mark Holloway, over the sale of part of the land. Mark, who had left farming years earlier, wanted his share of the inheritance sold off to pay debts of his own. David resisted fiercely, insisting the land stay in the family. Neighbors recalled shouting matches between the 2 men in the driveway, voices carrying across the fields. Though no one could prove it, many later wondered if those disputes planted the seeds of something darker. There was also the issue of the Holloway's hired hand, a drifter named Caleb Price. Caleb had arrived in town 2 years earlier, claiming he was looking for honest work. David took him on during planting season, and for a while, Caleb proved himself useful. But as time went on, whispers spread about his drinking habits, his unpredictable temper, and the nights he spent at the bar bragging about how much he knew of the Holloway's private life. Some said he grew too close to Emily, paying her compliments that made people uncomfortable. Others claimed he resented David for treating him like an outsider. By the fall of that year, Caleb had been fired, but not before threatening that, one day, people would regret crossing him. Still, no one imagined what was about to happen. On the evening of October 14, 1998, the Holloways went about their day as usual. Margaret made chicken and dumplings for dinner, Emily worked on a sketch of the family's old barn, and Ryan practiced his pitching in the yard until the light faded. Sarah curled up with her favorite stuffed rabbit as Margaret tucked her into bed. By 10 o'clock, the farmhouse was dark, its only sound the wind rattling through the corn stalks. But outside, in the shadows beyond the barn, someone was watching. The Holloway massacre would later be described by detectives as methodical, carried out with a cold precision that suggested planning, not passion. But before we dive into the horror of that night, we need to understand just how deeply this family was woven into the fabric of Willow Creek. Because when the news broke the next morning, it wasn't just the Holloway's world that was destroyed, it was the entire community's sense of safety. Willow Creek was the kind of town where you didn't lock your doors, where kids rode their bikes until dusk and neighbors left pies on your porch just because. Crime was rare, serious crime almost unheard of. Sheriff Alan Cooper had served in the county for nearly 2 decades and often joked his biggest case involved tracking down a missing cow. That's why the call he received just after sunrise on October 15th shook him to his core. It came from a neighbor, Mrs. Ellen Marsh, who lived across the road from the Holloways. She said she hadn't seen David out on his tractor that morning, which was unusual. When she walked over to check, she found the farmhouse eerily still. The front door was ajar, and inside she saw something that made her scream so loudly it echoed across the fields. Sheriff Cooper arrived minutes later, his deputy trailing behind. What they discovered inside would scar them for the rest of their lives. The farmhouse was silent, too silent. The living room looked untouched, but as they moved deeper inside, the scene grew darker. Upstairs, they found Emily still in her bed, her sketchbook open on the nightstand. Ryan was in his room, as if he had never made it past his baseball posters. Sarah lay curled up, clutching her stuffed rabbit. Margaret and David were in the master bedroom, side by side. All of them had been slaughtered in their sleep. The details of what happened that night would later come to light through forensic reports, but even at that first glance, it was clear this was no random break-in. Whoever had entered the Holloway home knew the layout, knew where each family member slept, and had moved through the house with chilling efficiency. There were no signs of forced entry. Nothing of value had been taken. Whoever killed the Holloways hadn't come for money. They had come for blood. As word spread through Willow Creek, disbelief turned to fear. People whispered in the diner, in the church pews, in the aisles of the grocery store. Parents began locking their doors at night. Children were kept indoors after dark, and the once peaceful town felt poisoned by suspicion. But the biggest question everyone asked was the same. Who could do this? Theories spread quickly. Some pointed to Caleb Price, the bitter farmhand with a grudge. Others suspected Mark Holloway, the brother with something to gain. A few whispered about strangers passing through town, drifters who might have targeted the family at random. Sheriff Cooper, though, noticed something strange in the crime scene photos that would later send the case in an unexpected direction. Near David's nightstand, on the floor half hidden beneath the bed, was a torn piece of paper. On it were only 3 words, scrawled in shaky handwriting, "It ends tonight." But whose handwriting was it? That question would drive the investigation forward and lead detectives into a web of secrets far more twisted than anyone in Willow Creek had ever imagined. And just when they thought they had a suspect in sight, something would happen that changed everything. The farmhouse murders left behind more than bodies. They left behind a message. But was it written by the killer or by one of the Holloways themselves in their final moments? Detectives would soon discover that this piece of paper wasn't the only clue hidden inside the Holloway home.